The Vanguard shuddered as the ship's hull groaned against the unseen forces of space. Captain Thorne Darnick stood rigid in the command center, his boots steady on the deck despite the tremor that vibrated through the steel beneath him. The dim lights of the bridge flickered briefly, the air thick with tension. He could feel the pulse of the ship's power surge through him, a rhythm that matched the pace of his heartbeat. His eyes narrowed, tracing the laser plasma displays that bathed the room in an eerie glow. They were approaching the outer edge of human territory. "Captain, we're picking up an anomaly at bearing 047, said Oren Jalek, the executive officer, his voice sharp and measured. He turned from the control panel, his fingers moving quickly over the glowing interface. "It's massive, sir." Darnick shifted his weight, his gloved hand tightening on the armrest. "Define massive, Lieutenant." Jalek didn't hesitate. "Bigger than anything we've ever cataloged, and it's not showing any signs of power emission. It's dead in the water." Darnick inhaled slowly, the scent of recycled air mingling with the faint, sterile scent of the ship's interior. The Vanguard had been on routine patrol for months, drifting through the cold, uncharted dark of space. Nothing about this region of the galaxy had suggested anything out of the ordinary until now. His eyes lingered on the heads-up display where the image of an unknown object loomed ahead, stark against the void. "Something doesn't feel right," Darnick muttered, his voice low but commanding. His gut instinct was at odds with the logic of the situation. Something about this encounter didn't add up. Not only was the ship unidentifiable, it seemed almost intentional, as if it had been placed here for them to find. "Sir," said Ren Ashkar, the communications officer, her fingers dancing over another console. Her voice was steady but edged with an unfamiliar unease. "We've tried hailing it on all frequencies. No response." Darnick's sharp gaze turned to her. "Keep trying, but don't waste our time. Maintain comms, Lieutenant. We're not here to trade pleasantries." As Ashkar continued her attempts to reach the unknown vessel, Darnick's attention shifted back to the front viewport. The inky blackness of space seemed to stretch endlessly, but in the distance, the outline of the massive ship was becoming clearer. It was angular, the silhouette jagged and sharp like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. It was larger than anything he had ever seen, dwarfing even the Vanguard in its sheer size. Every inch of its surface screamed danger, covered in what appeared to be weapon ports, launch tubes, and structures meant for battle, not peace. "Send a probe," Darnick ordered, his voice firm, the weight of the moment settling on him like a thick blanket. "Keep your distance. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." Oren Jalek nodded sharply, issuing commands to the bridge crew. A drone shot out from the Vanguard towards the mysterious ship, its silent form cutting through the vacuum of space like an arrow fired from a bow. Darnick watched the feed, a cool blue light illuminating the faces of his crew. The ship's shadow grew larger in the frame, and the Vanguard continued its approach at a calculated pace. Minutes passed, the tension mounting. The drone's feed began transmitting detailed scans, each data point filling the display with facts that didn't seem to fit the known laws of space travel. The strange vessel, codenamed Pioneer 47 by the AI systems, was not responding to any of their attempts to communicate, but its presence alone spoke volumes. "What do we know?" Darnick asked, his voice growing more intense. "Sensors indicate anything?" Varric Tierson, the tactical officer, leaned forward, scanning the readings with intense focus. "The mass is unbelievable, sir. It's almost like the ship is made of material that shouldn't exist. No power emissions, no life signs, no heat signature. It's as if it's frozen in time." Darnick stood still, his gaze unblinking. He could almost feel the temperature drop around him, the air growing colder with every passing moment. His mind raced, running through every possibility. The only logical conclusion was that this ship, this monstrosity, had somehow slipped through the folds of reality and was now caught in their path. Was it a relic of a lost civilization, a weapon, or perhaps something far worse? "Bring us closer, but maintain a safe distance," Darnick said, his voice steady, despite the growing knot of unease in his stomach. "All hands, prepare for any possibility. No surprises." The ship's crew began to mobilize, preparing for the unknown. The air crackled with the sound of orders being issued, footsteps quickening as they secured their stations. The weight of Darnak's responsibility settled deeper in his chest, but he wouldn't show it. He had seen much during his career, too much to count, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing had prepared him for the feeling of being on the edge of something vast and terrible. Red alert. Darnak's voice cut through the rising tension like a blade. Battle stations. This is not a drill. The command sounded throughout the Vanguard, and instantly the ship hummed to life. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in a harsh, urgent glow as crew members rushed to their posts, securing weapons and activating shields. Darnak watched the screens as the mysterious ship came into full view, its strange form now almost directly in front of them. The energy in the air seemed to thicken, like the calm before a storm. "Anything?" Darnak asked again, a slight edge to his tone. "No signs of life, no active weapons," Tierson replied, his eyes flicking from the tactical display to Darnak. "It's just floating there. It's like it's waiting for something." Darnak's eyes narrowed. Waiting. That word lingered in his mind like a dark cloud. What could a ship like this want with them? Why had it come to the edge of human space? "Send a message to Fleet Command. Request immediate support," Darnak ordered, "and get us closer. We're not backing down now." As the crew obeyed, the Vanguard slowly but surely crept toward the mysterious warship, its sensors and cameras tracking every inch of the massive object. The hum of the engines, deep and steady, was the only sound that filled the silence, the vibrations resonating through the deck like the beating of a heart. Captain Darnak could feel it in his bones, the foreboding sense that this moment was only the beginning. The unknown ship, the eerie silence, the waiting. Something was about to change, and whatever it was, it would redefine humanity's future. The Vanguard moved closer still, drawn inexorably toward the truth, toward the answers hidden within the cold, metallic shell of the Pioneer 47. The unknown stretched out before them like an abyss, waiting to swallow them whole. Darnak squared his shoulders, his expression hardening. "Let's find out what's waiting for us." The countdown to their first encounter had begun, and there would be no turning back. The Vanguard drifted closer, the distant hum of its engines filling the space around Captain Thorn Darnak like the steady pulse of a distant heartbeat. The eerie silence of the void outside the ship only amplified the tension inside the bridge. His fingers flexed on the console in front of him, but he didn't look away from the viewport. The massive, dormant ship loomed in front of them, its vast shape creeping steadily closer with each passing moment. "Captain," Oranjalik said, his voice steady yet tinged with uncertainty, "we're within range. Sensors are picking up further anomalies." Darnak didn't speak at first. His gaze was locked on the ghostly shape of the Pioneer 47. Something about it felt wrong. Not just in its size, but in the way it seemed to absorb light. There were no reflecting stars or distant galaxies caught on its hull, just the deep, endless black of space. The ship was a void unto itself. "Keep the distance," Darnak replied, his voice low. He could feel the weight of this moment settle into his chest like a lead anchor, yet his pulse remained steady, unbroken. "But prepare the boarding teams. We're going in." Varric Tierson, the tactical officer, was already busy on the plasma display, his fingers darting over the screen. "The object's structure. It's unlike anything we've ever catalogued. The material's integrity appears impossible. No radiation, no signals." He paused, glancing up with a troubled expression. "It's as if this ship has been sealed off from time itself." "Time," Darnak echoed, his lips curling slightly as if testing the sound of the word. The word stuck to his tongue, thick and dense. What kind of ship could defy the very thing that governed the universe? Darnak's eyes flickered over to Ren Ashkar, the communications officer. "Anything from Fleet Command?" Ashkar's fingers were flying over her console, her brow furrowing in frustration. "Nothing yet, sir. We're still getting interference. The signal's being blocked by—" She paused mid-sentence, her lips tightening. "The interference is odd. It's not like anything we've seen before. Darnick felt a ripple of unease stir in his gut. "Keep trying. I need something from them." His voice dropped a notch. "I don't care if it's just an acknowledgement. Just let me know they're awake." The ship was too quiet. Even the small noises, shuffling feet, muttered conversations, seemed muted as if something larger was pressing down on the vanguard. Darnick could taste the stale air of the bridge in his mouth, a dry, metallic aftertaste that seemed to stick to his teeth. Oranjalik broke the silence. "Sir, the boarding team is ready. We're equipped for anything, but we'll be walking into a void here. No idea what we're going to find." "Just make sure you keep your eyes open, Lieutenant," Darnick said, his gaze flickering briefly to Jalik before returning to the view ahead. "And keep the rest of the crew on high alert. This ship might look lifeless, but something doesn't feel right." The order was sent out, and within moments the team was ready. Darnick felt a subtle pressure in his chest as he prepared to lead the team himself. It wasn't fear that gripped him, but a deep curiosity laced with wariness. Whatever they were about to step into, it would change everything. The airlock opened with a dull hiss, and Darnick stepped forward, his boots making a muted sound as they struck the cold, lifeless metal beneath. The surface of the Pioneer 47 was like a slab of stone, smooth and unyielding, yet somehow absorbing the faintest vibrations of the Vanguard. It felt almost too silent, too still. "We're in," Varick's voice echoed in the comms. "This ship, it's alive, Captain, but not in any way I've ever seen. No signs of decay, no damage. It's like it's untouched." Darnick's hand fell to his sidearm instinctively, though he hadn't yet felt the need to draw it. "Keep your focus," he said to the team. "Stay close. Keep the pace steady." They walked, their footsteps echoing off the walls of the ship's interior, each step unnervingly clear against the ship's unnatural silence. Darnick could taste the faint tang of something unidentifiable in the air, almost sweet, but somehow wrong. His senses were on high alert as he studied the sleek architecture surrounding him. The walls were curved, elegant in their simplicity, but the glowing heads-up displays integrated into the walls projected data that seemed alien, despite their visual similarity to those on the Vanguard. "Plasma engines," Marek Voss murmured from behind him. "I can't make sense of these readings. The technology, it's more advanced than anything we have, but it's built on principles we understand." "Don't get distracted, engineer," Darnick replied, his tone gruff but not without respect. "Stay focused. We'll need to document everything later." Their journey took them deeper into the ship, following the faint emergency lighting that flickered on with each step. The farther they went, the less familiar the ship became. The walls, once sleek and almost pristine, began to change, evolving into something unfamiliar. Strange patterns etched into the surface that seemed to pulse with an almost organic energy. "Captain," Ren Ashkar's voice crackled in his ear. "We're picking up logs. They're coming through in bursts of data, but this one, it's from us." Darnick halted, his blood running cold for a moment as his gaze shot to Ashkar, his voice dropping to a low whisper. "What are you saying?" "It's a message," Ashkar replied, voice faltering. "From a version of us, or rather, from you." The crew stopped, the words hanging heavy in the air. "From me?" Darnick repeated, his voice not quite a question. The heads-up display in front of him flickered, and he could see it. A hologram of himself, but aged, grizzled. The voice of this future version of Darnick spoke, cold and resolute. "We're too late," the message began. "The swarm is already awake, and the end is inevitable unless we take action. This ship is humanity's last chance, but it will require everything, every sacrifice. Don't make the same mistakes I did." The words stung, sharp and uncomfortable, like a fist to his gut. The message continued with a chilling tone that seemed almost preordained, like this was their fate, written before they even stepped aboard. Darnick's hand gripped his sidearm tighter, but there was no threat in the room, only a growing sense of dread. This wasn't just some random encounter. This ship was here for a reason. They were meant to find it. And yet Darnick felt no relief, only the weight of an unavoidable destiny pressing down on his chest. "What the hell is going on here?" Varric muttered from behind him, his voice tinged with disbelief. "How could this ship have the records of us before we even existed?" Darnak turned slowly, meeting the eyes of his crew. "We don't know, but we will find out. Together." And as the strange silence of the Pioneer 47 pressed in around them, Darnak's resolve hardened. This was no longer just a mission. This was the beginning of something far greater, something that would either break them or forge a new future from the wreckage of the past. The weight of the message from the future hung like a shadow over the crew, thick and unsettling. Captain Thorn Darnak stood motionless before the last transmission, staring at the aged version of himself, his future self, speaking from beyond the confines of time. The words reverberated in his chest, a constant reminder that they had been thrust into something they could neither escape nor fully understand. The Pioneer 47 had no answers, only more questions, yet the truth was clear. Humanity was on the brink of annihilation, and this derelict ship was their only hope. There was no time to waste, no time for second guesses. "Get us back to the Vanguard," Darnak ordered, his voice colder than before. "We have work to do." His crew filed out, their movements automatic, as if they too were caught in the gravity of their situation. Darnak walked slowly, his boots heavy against the alien floor, the stillness around him like a pressure in his ears. The walls of the Pioneer 47 seemed to whisper faintly as they moved, but no one spoke of it. There was nothing to be said. Back aboard the Vanguard, the atmosphere was tense, yet oddly quiet. It was as though the very air held its breath, waiting for the next command. Darnak stood at the helm, his eyes flickering over the laser plasma displays that had become second nature to him over the years. The ship's steady hum was comforting, but even that felt distant, as if the very ship itself was bracing for what lay ahead. Oranjalik sat to his right, his fingers moving swiftly over the console, and Varric Tierson hovered over the tactical boards, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Captain, the Pioneer 47 systems are almost fully integrated into the Vanguard," Varric said, his voice crisp. "The technology is advanced. This ship, it's not just a warship. It's a testbed, an evolution. It's got weapons that—" "I know," Darnak interrupted, cutting him off. "I've seen the designs. We've all seen the recordings." His gaze shifted to the shimmering heads-up display, where the swarm of data filled the screen, streaming from the Pioneer 47 systems into the Vanguard. The technology was complex, almost dizzying in its scope, but it was their only shot. They would either use it to wipe out the swarm or be erased from existence. "Sir," Ren Ashkar called from her station, her voice slicing through the tension. "I'm not sure we've fully grasped the potential of these weapons yet. We're still analyzing the quantum systems, but what we've seen so far, there's no conventional military force that can counter these. They bend space itself." "Get to the point, Lieutenant," Darnak said, his tone clipped. The urgency in his voice wasn't a command. It was an instinct to survive. Ashkar hesitated for a moment before replying. "The weapons will tear apart the swarm's fleet, but the longer we wait, the harder it will be to use them effectively. The Pioneer 47's temporal drive is like nothing we've ever encountered. It manipulates the flow of time itself." Darnak turned sharply to face her. "Time? Explain, quickly." "It's more than just an engine," she said, eyes wide with the enormity of what they had discovered. "It's a weapon in itself, but its power is unstable. If we use it, we might alter the very timeline we're trying to preserve. It could change everything. It might even undo our victory." The room grew quieter as the implications of Ashkar's words set in. Darnak had never felt the weight of command more heavily than in this moment. To use this weapon was to walk a tightrope between salvation and destruction, and he wasn't sure which side would break first. "We don't have the luxury of doubt," Darnak finally said, his voice cold as he turned his focus back to the tactical screens. "We don't get to second-guess ourselves. We'll use everything this ship has, and we'll do it now." Oranjalik gave a sharp nod, his fingers flying across his display as he worked to reroute the data. syncing the Pioneer 47's quantum weapon systems with the Vanguard's. "Captain, if we fire, we might not get a second chance. The swarm's fleet is close. I can feel it." Darnak shot him a quick glance. "I trust your instincts, Lieutenant. Let's make sure they don't feel ours." The crew moved like a well-oiled machine, their actions automatic, honed through years of service. Varek Tirson's voice cut through the hum of the console as he adjusted the ship's targeting systems. "Weapons are coming online, Captain. The quantum cascade weapon is calibrated. But we'll need a precise shot. Any miscalculation, and we risk destabilizing the fabric of the battle." Darnak clenched his jaw. His crew had already accepted the risk, and now he was the one who had to bear the responsibility of it. He could almost feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, his thoughts heavy with the knowledge that this war, this moment, was his to command. "Target the largest cluster of the swarm ships. I want their command vessels first," Darnak ordered, his voice low but steady. He walked to the tactical console, standing shoulder to shoulder with Varek. "This is it. We have one shot to end this before they overwhelm us." The crew watched in silence as the targeting grid aligned on the display. The weapon systems, powered by the Pioneer 47's technology, hummed with an unnatural energy. A new kind of fear settled over the crew, but it was not one of terror. It was the realization that they were about to wield a power that could shatter their entire existence. "Locking target," Varek said, his tone calculated. "Quantum cascade charging." Darnak stood still, his breath steady as the countdown began in his mind. The tension in the air felt almost tangible, like a taut string ready to snap. The weight of the moment hung over them all. "Firing sequence ready," Ashkar confirmed, her voice a mixture of anticipation and caution. "Do it," Darnak ordered. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the ship shook, the entire Vanguard reverberating with the force of the weapon as a burst of raw energy, more destructive than anything they had ever seen, tore through space. The quantum cascade weapon released, its pulse traveling faster than light, shattering the surrounding space like glass under a hammer. The fabric of space-time buckled under the strain of the weapon, the swarm's ships breaking apart as they were sucked into the ripples of the cascade. Darnak felt the air around him grow heavier, the pressure mounting as the destruction unfolded on the plasma displays. The first wave of the swarm was all but obliterated, their ships collapsing inward as the weapon tore through them with impossible efficiency. But as the dust settled, Darnak's heart sank. The remaining swarm vessels had already begun to adapt. They were restructuring, reshaping, evolving in real time to counter the Vanguard's newfound weapon. "They're evolving," Varek said, his voice tight. "They're adapting faster than we can respond. They're not just a threat. They're a virus." Darnak's mind raced. He had known the swarm was capable of adapting, but this was beyond anything he'd anticipated. "Activate Protocol Omega," Darnak said, his voice sharp. "It's time to hit them harder." The ship's hull trembled once more as the aftermath of the quantum cascade reverberated through the Vanguard. The initial wave of the swarm had been decimated, their ships caught in the unrelenting grip of the quantum weapon. The crew had witnessed the impossible as the dark vessels crumbled and twisted, vanishing into the warping fabric of space-time. But now, as the eerie silence of space closed in around them, it became clear. Victory was fleeting, and the enemy was far from finished. Darnak stood at the helm, his posture rigid, eyes scanning the plasma displays before him. The initial satisfaction of their destructive shot was quickly dissipating, replaced by a cold realization that the swarm was not as easily undone as they had hoped. What they had just faced was only the beginning. "Captain." Orange Alec's voice cut through the tension, calm but tinged with a hard edge. "We've got readings. The remaining swarm ships, whatever we did, it only slowed them down. They're reorganizing, adapting. They're recalibrating their systems faster than we can track them." Darnak clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of the decision that loomed over them like a specter. His fingers tightened around the console as his mind raced through the countless strategies they'd discussed. There had to be something more, something they hadn't accounted for. The Pioneer 47's technology was their advantage, but it seemed the swarm had something equally monstrous. An insidious ability to evolve on command, adjusting mid-battle to counter every tactic. "Activate the next phase," Darnak ordered, his voice steady despite the growing pressure. "Varek, reroute all tactical systems to support. We'll need every advantage we can get." The tactical officer's hands moved quickly across the heads-up display, his face fixed in concentration. "I'm transferring control to the secondary network, engaging temporal distortions to disrupt the swarm's adaptive process. If we can stretch their resources thin, they won't have the capacity to evolve fast enough." Darnak watched, his eyes narrowing as the Vanguard began to pulse with an eerie, almost imperceptible vibration. The screens flickered, and in the dark expanse of space ahead, the first signs of the swarm's reorganization became clear. Their vessels were no longer the chaotic swarm they had once been. They were shifting, moving together in tightly formed clusters. "What are they doing?" Merrick Voss muttered from his station. "They're merging. It's like they're pooling their resources into fewer, larger ships." Darnak nodded grimly. "They're consolidating their forces, adapting to our quantum attack. It's a defense mechanism." Varick's voice was sharp, his focus unbroken. "If they combine, the quantum cascade will lose its effect. We'll need to target the core structures before they can fuse fully." "Agreed," Darnak replied, his mind working through the plan. "We need to hit them in the weak spots. They won't be able to adapt fast enough if we strike first." The air felt thick with the unspoken weight of their situation. Darnak could feel the pressure mounting as he faced the growing threat. Time was running out. The Vanguard's engines thrummed, but the low thrum was no longer comforting. It was a reminder of the very limited time they had before the swarm could reassemble their forces and mount a devastating counterattack. "Captain," Ashkar said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency, "we've detected the signal from their flagship. It's gathering resources from the smaller ships. They're preparing something larger. It's not just about survival anymore. They're trying to weaponize what's left." "Damn," Darnak muttered under his breath. "They're learning, too fast for us to keep up. But we have the upper hand, at least for now. Get the fleet into position, Jalek. It's time to act." Oren Jalek's fingers flew over his console. "Aye, sir. Moving the fleet into strike formation." The massive form of the Vanguard glided effortlessly through the stars, its sleek surface shimmering against the void, drawing ever closer to the new formation of swarm ships. Their vessels, once scattered across the nebula, were now forming an impenetrable barrier of destruction. Darnak watched through the viewport, his mind still calculating their next move. The task was monumental, but he had always trusted in his crew's ability to rise to the occasion. Varick's voice broke through the silence. "I'm adjusting the temporal distortion field now. With their fleet clustered together, we can disrupt their communications. They'll be flying blind for a few minutes." Darnak's eyes flicked to the tactical display, watching as the data poured in, the screens flashing with rapid updates. The plan was simple yet fraught with risk. If they could disable the swarm's communication and hit their ships while they were disoriented, they could buy precious moments, time they could use to finish this battle. "All ships, stand by," Darnak said, his voice a low growl. "We hit them hard, no hesitation. This is a one-shot opportunity." The Vanguard rocketed toward the swarm's formation, and Darnak's grip on the armrest tightened as the battle raged. His eyes never left the display as it filled with the immediate response of the enemy. They were moving faster now, the larger vessels weaving in and out of the smaller, faster ships. They had realized the threat too late. "Captain, the first strike's hitting now," Varick announced, his voice sharp with intensity. "The distortion field is destabilizing their coordinates. They're scattering. Fire on my mark." The tension on the bridge was electric, the air heavy as Darnak's pulse quickened. "Now," he barked, his command decisive and sharp. The Vanguard's weapon systems flared to life, releasing a barrage of quantum-infused energy into the swarm's formations. The force of the blast rocked the ship, but Darnak barely felt it. His focus was entirely on the results of their strike. The swarm's ships were caught in the crossfire, their structures bending and warping under the assault, their once unstoppable momentum halted. Some ships were ripped apart, their pieces scattered across the battlefield, while others struggled to maintain formation. Darnak's heart beat in sync with the pounding of the weapon's fire. This was what they had trained for. This was why they had fought to stay alive. But there was no relief. Not yet. "Get us out of here, now!" Darnak shouted, his voice urgent. The crew responded instantly. The Vanguard shifted course, evading the retaliatory blast from the surviving swarm vessels. The quantum weapons, though devastating, had not been enough to break the swarm completely. They had only pushed them back, left them scrambling. The battle was still far from over. "Captain," Varric said, his voice tight, "they're adapting again. We're not out of the woods yet. We need more firepower to finish them." Darnak looked at the devastation on the screen, the vastness of it, the uncertainty of it all. He knew what had to be done. "Prepare the second phase," he said quietly. "If we don't end this now, they'll just come back stronger. This war ends today." As the crew mobilized, Darnak leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. The weight of the moment rested heavily on his shoulders, but it was a burden he had accepted long ago. They would fight, not because they had a choice, but because they had something worth fighting for. Humanity's future was at stake, and they would burn through every resource, every last weapon, until the swarm was nothing more than a fleeting nightmare in the dark. The battle raged on, a furious clash of forces in the heart of the nebula, where the very fabric of space seemed to warp and bend with each pulse of energy. The Vanguard had struck a blow to the swarm, but now, as the surviving ships regrouped, the threat was far from over. Darnak stood at the helm, his body tense but his mind sharp, calculating their next move. The quantum cascade had shaken the enemy, but it hadn't finished them. The swarm had adapted too quickly, and now they were on the offensive. "Captain," Varric's voice broke through the tense silence, "the swarm's reorganizing. They're preparing to counter our next strike. If we don't hit them hard enough, we risk pushing them into a corner they can fight back from." Darnak's eyes flickered to the tactical display. The swarm ships were more than just a threat now. They were a force of nature, evolving, learning, adapting at an alarming rate. They were everything humanity had feared, but in that moment Darnak understood something crucial. They were also humanity's greatest challenge and the reason they fought. "We know what they're capable of," Darnak said, his voice calm but edged with determination. "But we're not backing down. Prepare the final strike. I want everything we've got." Jalek's fingers danced across the plasma interface, recalibrating their weapon systems and redirecting energy to the quantum cannons. The Vanguard was a marvel of human ingenuity, but even its advanced systems were beginning to show signs of strain. They had pushed the ship and its crew to the limit, but there was no turning back. Not now. The Vanguard shifted course, heading straight for the heart of the swarm's newly reformed cluster. Darnak watched, his breath steady, as the space around them filled with the eerie glow of the quantum field. The display ahead flickered, showing the swarm's ships, their jagged alien forms merging and separating, their biomechanical hulls twisting and reshaping in ways that defied the laws of physics. They were learning faster than anything humanity had ever faced, but it didn't matter. "Lock onto the command vessel," Darnak ordered, his voice unwavering. "We take them out first." Varric nodded, his face grim. "Firing solution locked. On your mark, Captain." Darnak's hand hovered over the command interface, his fingers aching to push the button. The tension in the air was unbearable, and every instinct in him told him to wait, to hesitate. But that wasn't the kind of leader he was. He had lived through too many battles to let fear cloud his judgment now. "Mark," he said, his voice low but certain. In an instant, the Vanguard unleashed everything it had. Quantum energy rippled through the dark void, a concentrated blast of power that tore through the swarm's formation. The first hit was devastating. Ships splintered and disintegrated under the force of the beam, their twisted forms falling into chaos. The remaining swarm vessels scattered, disoriented by the sheer force of the blast, but they weren't finished. Not yet. "Captain," Varric's voice was tight with urgency, "they're adapting again. Their central ship, it's not just surviving, it's evolving into something new." Darnak's eyes hardened. "We've seen this before. It won't work this time." The swarm's ships were warping, fusing together, forming a massive central vessel that pulsed with an unnatural energy. It was a monstrosity, something that shouldn't exist. A culmination of everything the swarm had learned in a matter of minutes. "Target the core," Darnak said, his voice barely a whisper as he watched the grotesque fusion unfold. "We can't let them escape." "Locking on," Varric confirmed, his hands a blur on the controls. Darnak's mind was already racing, planning for the worst-case scenario. He knew that if they didn't hit the core now, the swarm would retaliate with an unimaginable force. This was the moment they had prepared for, but nothing about it felt familiar. This wasn't just another enemy. They were facing the very concept of survival, a creature that could bend the rules of life and death. "Captain, we've got an incoming transmission from Fleet Command," Ashkar said suddenly, her voice unsteady. "They've detected another swarm fleet. There's a second wave coming." Darnak's heart skipped a beat, but his expression remained neutral. "How long until they arrive?" "A few minutes, maybe less," Ashkar replied. He turned to face his crew. They were all in the same boat now, fighting not just for victory but for their very existence. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders, but he refused to let it break him. They had faced worse before. They had always faced worse. "Get me a direct channel to Fleet Command," Darnak said. "We need support. Now." The room fell silent as Ashkar worked to open the communication. The minutes stretched on like hours, the pressure mounting with every passing second. The fate of humanity hung on this one battle. "Fleet Command is online, Captain," Ashkar said. Darnak nodded, his voice firm as he addressed the Admiral. "This is Captain Darnak of the Vanguard. We need backup, and we need it yesterday. The swarm is evolving faster than we can track them, and we're about to face a second fleet." There was a pause on the line, and then Admiral Marcus's voice came through, steady and calm. "We're on our way, Darnak, but you need to hold the line for as long as you can. We're modifying the fleet with Pioneer 47's tech, but we won't be ready in time to give you the backup you need." "Understood," Darnak said, his tone resolute. "We'll hold the line. Make sure you're ready when we need you." The line went silent, and Darnak turned back to his crew. The reality of the situation hit him hard, but his resolve only deepened. This was their moment, humanity's last stand. He looked at Varric, who met his gaze without flinching. "Prepare the final strike," Darnak said. "We're going in for the kill." The ship shuddered as the crew moved with mechanical precision, preparing for their last, desperate attack. The Vanguard surged forward, hurtling towards the swarm's newly formed central vessel. The tension in the air was electric as the ship's targeting systems locked on, the final weapons charging with a low, ominous hum. "On my mark," Darnak said, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. This is it. The quantum weapons powered up, the energy coalescing into a single concentrated beam of destruction. Darnak's hand hovered over the control, feeling the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was humanity proving, once and for all, that it was capable of greatness. "Now," Darnak commanded. The Vanguard unleashed its final strike, the energy blasting forward with the force of 1,000 suns. The central swarm vessel twisted and buckled under the onslaught, its biomechanical hull collapsing into a vortex of destruction. The remaining swarm ships disintegrated, their adaptive systems failing under the overwhelming force of the quantum weapon. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the stars seemed to breathe again, the void left behind by the swarm's annihilation, a testament to their victory. Darnak's voice broke through the stillness. "It's over." But it wasn't just over for the swarm. It was over for humanity's past. They had faced extinction and come out on the other side, stronger, more united than ever before. They had done the impossible. The Vanguard floated in the dark, surrounded by the remnants of the battle, the weight of the future heavy on its shoulders. Darnak stood at the helm, his eyes focused on the stars ahead, knowing that humanity's journey had only just begun. They had rewritten the rules. They had fought for a future they deserved, and now they would shape it.